snow drifted in thin, uncertain veils along the wrought iron railings of Marchmont Estate, softening the grandeur of its white stone facade as if winter itself wished to hide the sharp edges of society's merciless gaze. Inside, warmth from dozens of lamps spilled across the marbled floors, gilded mirrors, and crimson draperies, but none of it reached Eleanor Whitford as she stepped through the entrance hall with careful, measured breath. Her pale blue gown, altered 3 times to disguise aging seams, clung to her with the fragile hope that she might go unnoticed. Yet even before she removed her gloves, the first whispers rose like a cruel, familiar draft. "Poor creature," someone murmured behind a fan. "The Whitfords used to matter. And now she seeks employment, I'm told. Imagine attending a tea to beg for work." Eleanor kept her gaze fixed ahead, spine straight, though each word struck like sleet against bare skin. She had come only to speak with Lady Marchmont about a potential governess post, discreetly, privately, with dignity. But dignity was a thin thread in rooms like these, easily snapped, easily scattered. She reached the refreshment table, her hands only faintly unsteady as she lifted a cup of mulled wine. For a moment, she pretended she was simply another guest, another young woman enjoying the early winter gathering. She inhaled the sweet steam, willing herself to be small, invisible. Yet her invisibility had long ago become another kind of shame. "Miss Whitford," a bright, brittle voice sang out. Clara Hensley, immaculate in rose silk, swept toward her. "How lovely to see you. I did not expect, well, your presence." Her smile glimmered with a sharpened edge. Eleanor returned a polite nod. "The pleasure is mine." Clara leaned nearer, as if sharing a secret. "I've heard the Christmas ball will be exquisite this year, though invitations are selective." Before Eleanor could respond, Clara's elbow accidentally nudged her hand. The cup tipped. Mulled wine, deep crimson, merciless in hue, splashed across Eleanor's bodice in a blooming stain. Gasps fluttered around them like startled birds. "Oh, how unfortunate!" Clara exclaimed, feigning horror. "These things happen when one is nervous." Laughter rippled, not roaring, not overt, just enough to fray what remained of Eleanor's composure. She stepped back from the table, pressing a handkerchief to her gown, feeling heat rise to her cheeks despite the cold she carried within. "I'm terribly sorry," Clara added, though her eyes gleamed. Perhaps a darker dress would be more forgiving next time. The humiliation tightened around Eleanor like a corset laced too cruelly. She retreated toward a window alcove where frost feathered the glass, and the noise dissolved into a distant hum. She could almost pretend she was outside, standing in the quiet snow, far from the venom dressed in silk and pearls. Her breath wavered. She blinked hard, refusing to surrender to tears. Not here, not before these people who circled weakness like wolves scenting blood. She had endured whispers for months. Her family's debt, her father's collapse, their estates sold piece by piece. But today, the sting hit deeper. She had not expected hope to feel so fragile. As she dabbed futilely at her gown, a subtle shift in the room's air stirred her attention. Conversations dimmed, the clinking of glass softened. A presence entered, silent yet commanding, like the turning of a tide. Eleanor did not need to look to know who it was. Adrian Hawthorne, Duke of Windermere. He moved through the room with the restrained elegance of a man accustomed to being watched, but determined not to perform. Tall, dark-haired, impeccably composed, he carried the kind of gravity that made people stand straighter as he passed. And yet there was something colder beneath the surface, an aloofness sharpened by tragedy, if the rumors were true. Eleanor kept her eyes on the frosted window, hoping he would not see her. A duke had no business noticing a woman like her. But fate, in its peculiar cruelty, seemed intent on stripping her of even the smallest refuge. His reflection appeared beside hers in the glass. Broad shoulders, crisp black coat, silver detailing at his collar that glinted like winter starlight. "Miss Whitford," he said quietly. His voice held a low steadiness, neither pitying nor curious, simply certain. Eleanor turned, startled. Your Grace. She dipped into a quick curtsy, wincing as the stain on her dress shifted with the movement. You appear distressed. His eyes flicked to the ruined fabric, then back to her face. Has someone wronged you? She stiffened. Nothing of consequence. Accidents occur. Unprovoked accidents rarely provoke such cruelty, he replied, his tone controlled but edged with something darker. I observed enough. Her heart jolted. She had not realized he had seen anything at all, let alone cared to. Please think nothing of it. I intend to leave shortly. Is that your wish, he asked, or simply what you believe is expected of you? The gentleness of the question pierced her defenses more painfully than any insult. It matters little, Your Grace. He studied her a moment, the quiet scrutiny of a man who rarely misjudged character. Miss Whitford, I believe you, and I may be of use to one another. Eleanor stilled. I beg your pardon? You seek restoration of your reputation, he said, his voice dropping to a private register. And I find myself in need of a solution to a predicament that has become increasingly inconvenient. Confusion fluttered inside her. I do not understand. I will explain, he said, but not here. Before she could respond, several ladies cast glances toward them. Sharp, assessing, hungry for scandal. The Duke seemed to notice as well, for he shifted subtly, positioning himself to shield Eleanor from view, an action both protective and impossibly intimate. Her pulse quickened. Why would a man like him, a duke burdened with rumors of his own, approach her of all people? He lowered his voice. Meet me in the West Conservatory in a quarter hour. If you choose not to come, I shall trouble you no further. With a slight bow, he left her standing amid the whispering warmth and flickering lights, the scent of pine and citrus swirling around her. Eleanor pressed a hand to her stained bodice, breath unsteady. The humiliation of the afternoon still clung to her, but beneath it now flickered something bewildering, a spark of possibility, dangerous and bright. She looked toward the corridor leading to the conservatory, where lantern light softened into shadow. Whatever awaited her there, it would reshape the course of everything she thought she knew. Lanterns glowed like captured stars in the West Conservatory, casting soft halos across winter-blooming camellias and glass panes kissed by frost. Eleanor stepped inside with cautious breath, her hands clasped before her as if holding together what remained of her composure. The air smelled of evergreen and damp earth, a quiet sanctuary compared to the sharp-edged gossip of the drawing-room she had fled. Yet the Duke of Windermere stood at the center of it, waiting with the stillness of a man accustomed to commanding attention without uttering a word. He turned when she entered. I am grateful you came, he said, voice low yet steady enough to anchor the room. I came only to understand your meaning, Your Grace, she replied, though I doubt I am of any use to a gentleman of your standing. A faint, unreadable shadow crossed his features. My standing, he said, is precisely the complication. He motioned toward a bench nestled among the camellias, its wooden surface warmed slightly by a nearby brazier. Eleanor hesitated before seating herself, aware of the weight of his presence as he remained standing, framed by moonlight filtering through glass. There are rumors about me, he began, as I'm sure you have heard. Eleanor looked down, uncertain. London speaks of everyone, Your Grace. It is not my place to judge the accuracy of its words. A diplomatic answer, he murmured, but I will be direct. My family requires me to secure an alliance with the East March delegation before the new year. Parliament expects stability. Yet certain individuals, his jaw tightened, are intent on portraying me as a man incapable of devotion, commitment, or trust. Eleanor lifted her gaze. Because of the tragedy with your late fiancé? His silence answered. The story had reached every corner of society. The whispers of betrayal, of heartbreak, of a love that ended in ruin. Eleanor braced herself, fearing she had overstepped, but he merely exhaled, as though granting her honesty in return. Yes, he said quietly. Her memory has become a weapon wielded against me. I do not intend to allow the past to dictate my future or my obligations to the crown. And how am I involved? He reached into his coat, and withdrew a small velvet box. Setting it beside her on the bench, he said, "I need a betrothed." Temporarily, her breath caught. "Your Grace, surely you cannot mean." "I do." He paused, steadying his tone. "I require someone unconnected to the intrigues of court. Someone who is truthful, who has no ambition to manipulate the situation for her own gain." His eyes met hers, dark and unwavering. "I require you, Miss Whitford." The room pulsed with silence, broken only by the soft hiss of the brazier. Eleanor's pulse fluttered in disbelief. "You asked for a deception," she whispered. "A necessary one. How long?" "Only until the Christmas ball. Afterward, I shall publicly dissolve the engagement and compensate you generously. Your reputation will be restored, and any position you desire will be yours." It was madness, glittering, dangerous madness, but also a lifeline she had not expected to be offered. Yet her dignity, bruised though it was, resisted the notion of being paraded about as a convenient fiction. "I do not wish to be pitted," she said, "or bought." For the first time, something softened in his expression, something like understanding. He opened the velvet box. Inside lay a brooch shaped like a winter rose, its silver petals inlaid with tiny pearls that shimmered like fallen snow. "This belonged to my mother," he said. "It is offered not as payment, but as a symbol. If you agree to stand beside me, the world will see you differently. They will see you as I do." "How do you see me?" she asked before she could stop herself. "A woman of strength, despite the cruelty she endures," he said. "A woman who deserves far better than the disdain offered to her." Her throat tightened. No one had spoken to her so plainly in months. Perhaps not ever. She touched the brooch, its metal cool against her fingertips, and felt tremors of possibility ripple through her. "And if I refuse?" He inclined his head. "Then I shall respect your decision. But I fear society will not be nearly as gracious." Eleanor thought of the spilled wine, the laughter disguised as politeness, the conversations that silenced when she walked by. She thought of futures narrowing into nothing, of doors closing faster than she could knock. Slowly, she lifted the brooch from the box. "Very well," she said softly. "I will play the role you require." Relief flickered across his face, not triumph, but something quieter, as if her acceptance eased a burden heavier than he dared admit. "Thank you," he said. "It will not be without challenges. We must behave as though truly betrothed. There will be lessons, conduct, posture, the appearance of easy familiarity. I will do my best to meet your expectations." He stepped closer then, not touching her, but near enough that she felt his nearness like warmth radiating through the winter air. "I have one rule that must be honored above all others." She tensed. "What is it?" His eyes held hers with unsettling intensity. "You must not fall in love with me." Air caught sharp in her lungs. "Why such a rule?" "Because sentiment," he said, his voice suddenly colder, "complicates what must remain simple." "Your Grace," she whispered, "you assume much of a woman you barely know. Better to state it plainly than risk harm later." He turned away then, the moment collapsing into formal distance once more. Eleanor rose, gathering the edges of her stained gown, the brooch clasped tightly in her hand. They left the conservatory separately, as agreed, but fate was already conspiring against their desire for secrecy. As Eleanor passed one of the maids near the corridor, the girl's eyes widened at the sight of the brooch glittering in Eleanor's grip. A gasp escaped her, followed by a stifled whisper to another servant. By the time Eleanor reached the cloakroom, 2 footmen were murmuring. By the time she stepped outside into the crisp night, a coachman gave her a startled, appraising look. The Duke's carriage arrived to return her home, but as she climbed inside, she felt the shift in the air, an invisible thread of rumor already spinning through the city like wildfire catching tinder. She fastened the brooch at her throat, breath unsteady. In the dark reflection of the carriage window, she saw not the timid, humiliated woman from earlier that afternoon, but someone neither she nor London yet understood. And far across the estate, the Duke of Windermere paused beneath a lantern, sensing, perhaps instinctively, that the storm he had hoped to control had already begun to rage far beyond his reach. A full day of snowfall had hushed London into a muted dreamscape, and by evening, Windermere Estate stood haloed beneath drifting flakes that softened its sharp stone lines into something almost tender. Eleanor stepped down from the Duke's carriage with a tremor running through her limbs, for she had been summoned urgently. An unexpected note written in his precise hand, requesting her presence despite the worsening storm. Lanterns flickered along the walkway, their golden light swallowed quickly by the gathering white. She clutched her cloak tighter and wondered whether the world outside or the world within her chest felt colder. A footman ushered her into the entrance hall, where she shed her cloak and immediately felt the estate's luxury press around her like a second skin. She did not belong here, and yet her brooch, the Duke's brooch, glimmered at her collar as though insisting otherwise. Before she could steady herself, Adrian Hawthorne appeared at the top of the grand staircase, his expression unusually unreadable. "Miss Whitford," he called, descending with measured strides. "Thank you for coming so swiftly. I feared it must be urgent, given the weather," she replied, hoping her voice carried more composure than she felt. "It is," he said simply. "A storm has settled in, and the roads are already becoming impassable. You will remain here tonight." Eleanor froze. "Remain? But your grace, your safety outweighs propriety," he said. "The servants have long since retired to their quarters. Only a skeleton staff remains, and they are discreet." A quiver of unease threaded with something warmer moved through her. "I understand," she murmured. "Good." He paused, studying her with a depth she could not decipher. "There is another reason I wish for you to come. Join me in the library." The library glowed with firelight, its tall shelves rising like cathedral walls around them. A supper tray had been placed on a small table. Soup, bread, steaming tea, an intimacy that unsettled Eleanor more than any grand gesture could. She sat opposite him, aware of the storm thrashing against the windows like a living thing. He gestured to the tray. "You must eat. You are pale." "I am quite well," she insisted. "You need not pretend strength with me." His voice softened unexpectedly. "Not here." The concern in his tone loosened something inside her. She took a sip of tea, letting its heat anchor her. After a long silence, he spoke again. "The rumors have grown worse." Eleanor lowered her gaze. "About us?" "Yes, and about me." She swallowed. "I have tried not to listen. Yet you must have heard enough to question my motives." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "I question many things, Your Grace, but your motives are not among them." His expression shifted, surprise, faint and quickly hidden. "You have more faith in me than most." "Then most have not looked closely," she said. He inhaled, as if steadying himself. "I wish to clarify matters between us. You deserve that. The world thinks me heartless because of what happened with Lady Clarice Montfort." He paused. "Do you know the truth of it?" "I only know what the papers claimed. They claimed I abandoned her, betrayed her, drove her to despair." His jaw tightened. "What they did not print is that she loved another, a man she could not have publicly. I discovered it, too late, and ended our engagement privately to protect her reputation. She fled the country soon after, but her family, they blamed me." Eleanor's breath caught. "You bore the shame for her." "I bore what was necessary," he said. "Yet the weight of the scandal has never left me. It follows me still, used against me in every political maneuver." A fragile quiet settled between them. Eleanor felt her earlier doubt dissolve into something like admiration. "You have carried so much in silence," she whispered. Silence seemed kinder than truth. Then, after a moment, "But I no longer know if it was wise." She reached across the table, not quite touching his hand, but close enough that warmth shimmered in the space between them. "You did what you believed honorable." His gaze dropped to her fingers, lingering there with a reverence that startled her. When he spoke again, his voice was low. "You are unexpectedly perceptive, Miss Whitford." The fire crackled, the storm howled. The entire world seemed to narrow to the breath between them. He lifted a hand slowly, brushing a stray snowflake from her hair. She had not realized it had clung there, melting onto her skin. The gentleness of his touch sent a shiver arrowing through her chest. You arrived with snow tangled in your curls, he murmured, as though winter itself refused to let you enter unclaimed. Her pulse stuttered. Your Grace. He withdrew his hand, but the air between them thrummed with something neither dared name. Tell me, he said softly, why you agreed to this ruse. Truly, Eleanor hesitated. Honesty had become a rare currency in her life. But tonight, with the storm sealing them away from the world, truth seemed the only offering worth giving. I agreed, she said, because I had grown tired of shrinking, tired of being dismissed, pitted, or ignored. I fear that if I did not grasp this chance, this outrageous chance, I might fade entirely. Her voice trembled, and I do not want to become invisible. He listened with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she had never known. You are not invisible, he said. Not to me. Her breath quickened. You hardly know me, and yet, he murmured, I feel I do. The room pulsed with quiet yearning. Before either could speak again, frantic knocking shattered the moment. A footman burst in, face pale. Your Grace, terribly sorry, sir, but a messenger arrived from London. Urgent news. Adrian rose immediately, tension coiling in his shoulders. What news? The footman swallowed. A scandal, sir, concerning Miss Whitford. Eleanor's heart lurched. Me? Yes, miss. The man held out a damp sheet of newsprint. The early edition. It claims your engagement to his Grace is false, a ploy. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. The Duke snatched the paper, scanning it, his expression darkening with every line. This, he said, voice like ice cracking, changes everything. The storm outside raged harder, rattling the windows as though nature itself knew that the quiet sanctuary of the night had shattered, and nothing between them would be simple again. The morning broke pale and undecided, as if the sky itself feared the consequences of whatever was about to unfold. Alara stood at the balcony rail, the cold iron biting into her palms as she stared out at the estate grounds soaked in dawn frost. Everything she had confessed the night before, everything she had allowed herself to feel, clung to her like a second skin she could neither shed nor hide. She replayed Rowan's expression again and again, the stillness in his eyes, the fracture of restraint in his voice, the promise he had not quite spoken aloud. She'd walked away because the alternative would have undone her entirely. Now she wondered if walking away had been the true undoing. Footsteps sounded behind her, slow and deliberate. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. She knew the rhythm of his stride now, the silent authority woven into every measured movement. Rowan stopped a breath behind her, his presence a heat that chased away the morning chill. For a long moment, he said nothing. Neither did she. Silence pressed between them like a fragile veil, one either of them could tear through with a single truth. Did you sleep at all? He asked finally, the softness of his tone at war with its guarded edge. No, she admitted. You? He exhaled once, quiet but weighted. Not really. The honesty in that answer startled her. Rowan was a man born of discipline and effortlessness in equal measure. He did not speak of his own fractures unless forced. She gripped the rail harder, bracing herself for whatever he wasn't saying. You left, he murmured, not accusing, not wounded, simply stating it like a fact of gravity. When I was ready to what? Her voice trembled in spite of her effort to keep it calm. To tell me something that would make everything worse, or something that would make it impossible to pretend nothing happened between us. He stepped around her, positioning himself so she had no choice but to meet his gaze. The morning light gilded him in pale gold, but the fire in his eyes was stubbornly unsoftened. To tell you the truth, even if it ruins everything else. Her breath caught. She had prepared herself for deflection, for politeness, for a strategic withdrawal cloaked in honor. But not this. Never this. Rowan, your promise to my father's ally. I'm promised. Your promise to a man you don't want. His voice was low, controlled, but the restraint only sharpened the emotion beneath it. And I am bound to an arrangement I never agreed to. Everyone around us has decided what our futures should look like without asking either of us. That's how alliances work, she whispered. Then let them break. She flinched. You can't mean that. I do. He reached for her wrist, but stopped just before touching her, as if the air between them were a living thing he feared to disturb. Alara, I meant every word last night. I meant it before last night. You think I've guided you through scandal and chaos because it was my duty? No. I did it because somewhere along the way, the girl I was meant to protect became the woman I could not ignore. Her pulse hammered. She felt it everywhere. Her throat, her fingertips, her ribs struggling to contain her heart. And now, she whispered. Now, he said, I'm tired of pretending I don't want you. The confession struck her like a physical blow. Every defense she'd meticulously built over months shuddered. She had wanted to hear those words. She had feared them too, because wanting Rowan Warwick was dangerous, not just politically, not just socially, but inwardly. Loving him, if that was even what this was, would change everything she understood about herself. You're asking me to destroy alliances, she said. Destroy promises. Destroy. I'm asking you to choose yourself. For once. His gaze softened, but his voice didn't lose its edge. And if you choose me along the way, I will bear every consequence. A tremor passed through her. She turned away, stepping back to the balcony rail, her thoughts racing with all the terrible possibilities. If we do this, she said slowly, my father will be ashamed. The council will be furious. Your rivals will accuse you of manipulation. And the man I'm meant to marry won't let this pass quietly. Rowan moved to stand beside her, shoulders barely touching. I know, and you're ready for that. He looked out over the frost-touched fields. Alara, I've marched into battles with less certainty than I feel right now. The confession almost undid her. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth, tried to steady herself. I don't want to be another scandal you're forced to manage. You're not a scandal. His voice roughened. You're the only truth I've allowed myself. She turned toward him slowly, her heart aching with every beat. I'm terrified. So am I, he said. But fear has never been a reason to walk away. His words were gentle, but they cracked something open inside her. She took a single, careful step toward him. When he didn't move, she stepped closer still, until their breaths mingled and the cold morning dissolved around them. Rowan, her voice was barely a whisper. If we do this, we don't get to go back. He finally touched her, his hand cupping her cheek with startling tenderness. I don't want to go back. Her eyes stung. A tear slipped free before she could stop it, but he brushed it away with his thumb, his touch reverent. Then, she whispered, I choose you. The words left her like an exhale she'd been holding her entire life. For a heartbeat, Rowan simply stared at her, as if he needed to memorize the moment, carve it into the marrow of his memory. Then he pulled her into him, not with urgency, but with a fierce, protective certainty that stole her breath. Below them, at the edge of the fields, a group of riders appeared, dark figures cutting through the pale morning. Rowan stiffened. Alara froze. She recognized the banner they carried. Her betrothed had arrived early, and he was not alone. The riders closed in with unhurried precision, their silhouettes splitting the frost-heavy air like blades. Alara felt Rowan's arm tense around her, a warning and a vow in one instinctive motion. Her breath hitched when she recognized the man leading the group. Kaladin Thorne, her betrothed, cloaked in crimson and impatience. His posture was immaculate, but the tilt of his chin was sharp with offense. He dismounted before the horses had even stilled, boots grinding into the frozen earth as he strode toward the balcony steps. Alara, he called, his voice cutting through the morning stillness. I believe you have forgotten the terms of our arrangement. Rowan moved before she could respond, stepping into Kaladin's line of sight. You're early, he said, his tone terribly calm. Kaladin's eyes narrowed. And you're far too close to what is not yours. The words hit Alara like a slap, but Rowan didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped down from the balcony, placing himself between Kaladin and the woman he had just sworn to choose. The soldiers behind Kaladin shifted, sensing the tension like a scent in the wind. Kaladin's gaze slid to Alara with icy disbelief. You disgrace yourself. And your house. What, precisely, has the war duke told you to make you forget duty? Alara descended the steps slowly, refusing to cower. Her pulse beat painfully in her throat, but her voice held steady. He didn't tell me anything, she said. I made my choice. Kaladin blinked, the expression unfamiliar on a man accustomed to control. Your choice. The words cracked. You think you can simply rewrite your future because he whispered some gallant lies? Rowan's jaw clenched. Careful. No, Kaladin snarled. This ends now. He gestured sharply, and two of his men started forward. Rowan's blade was out in a heartbeat. Smooth, silent, devastatingly sure. The soldiers halted. The air itself seemed to freeze. You take one more step toward her, Rowan said, and this becomes something none of us walk away from. Alara moved quickly to Rowan's side, her fingers brushing his sleeve. His glance flicked to her, softening for a moment before hardening again as he faced Kaladin. Kaladin's nostrils flared. You would destroy an alliance for a moment's indulgence? This is not indulgence, Rowan said. This is the truth you never bothered to see. Kaladin barked a laugh devoid of humor. Truth? She is a contract, a seal, a symbol of unity. She belongs to... I belong to myself. Alara cut in, her voice trembling with fury she had never allowed herself to use. And I will not marry someone who sees me as a ledger's line. For the first time, Kaladin faltered. His gaze flicked between them, the man standing with lethal resolve, and the woman who refused to look away. You would shame your father, he said quietly. He'll recover, she answered. But I won't recover from a life I didn't choose. Kaladin's jaw tightened until it trembled. And what of the chaos you unleash? The alliance is broken? The house is offended? You think the council will overlook this betrayal? Rowan stepped forward, sheathing his blade, but keeping his stance unyielding. If they want war, they can name it. But understand this, you will not force her hand. Not while I draw breath. Kaladin's shoulders lifted as though he were mustering the old arrogance he'd worn with such ease. But beneath it, Alara saw something else. Humiliation, yes, but also a sharp wound to pride he had never expected to feel. You think you've won, he hissed. But decisions like this don't die quietly. Neither do decisions made in fear, Rowan replied. A long, brittle silence settled between them, broken only by the snort of a restless horse. Kaladin finally exhaled, the sound almost strangled. He turned to Alara, his voice lower but no less cutting. You will regret this. Perhaps, she said, but it will be my regret, not yours to wield. For a moment, Alara wondered if he'd strike her. But Kaladin simply drew himself up, snapping his cloak around his shoulders. Mount, he ordered his men. We leave. The soldiers obeyed without question, though several cast wary glances at Rowan. Kaladin swung onto his horse, pausing only long enough to look back one last time. This is not finished, he said. No, Rowan murmured. It isn't. Kaladin's horse kicked up frozen earth as he rode away, his men trailing like a dark shadow, dissolving into the fields. Only when the last rider disappeared beyond the rise did Rowan let out a long breath, the tension draining from his posture in a controlled release. Alara stepped closer, her hands trembling. Rowan caught them gently. Are you frightened? Yes, she whispered, but I don't want to turn back. He brushed a strand of wind-blown hair from her face, his thumb lingering against her cheek. Then we face whatever comes next. Together. She leaned into him, a rush of relief and terror and fears, aching hopes swelling beneath her ribs. The world around them was suddenly vast, uncertain, and theirs. But as they stood there, a distant horn sounded across the valley, low, somber, unmistakably official. Rowan's expression shifted. That's the council's summons, he said quietly. Alara's pulse stilled. Their choice had been made. Now the world would answer.